The letter arrived on a morning when the sisters were deciding which one of them would skip breakfast so the other could eat. It was thin, official, and looked like every other notice that usually brought bad news. Neither of them knew that inside it waited the first crack of light after years of darkness, or that an abandoned building full of silence was about to answer prayers they had stopped saying out loud. If you believe in silent heroes and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Stories like this exist to remind us that hope often arrives quietly when we least expect it. Emily and Sarah Collins have been homeless for nearly 3 years. Raised in the United States in a small Christian household, they grew up believing that faith could carry people through anything. But faith had been tested again and again. After their parents died in a car accident, medical bills swallowed what little savings existed. Extended family drifted away, not out of cruelty, but inconvenience. One by one, doors closed until the sisters found themselves sleeping in shelters, cars, and sometimes on church steps when space ran out. Emily, the older sister, carried the weight of responsibility heavily. She worked any job she could find, cleaned offices at night, stocked shelves before dawn, and still felt like she was failing. Sarah, younger and physically weaker after years of illness, carried emotional strength instead. She believed that their story was not finished, even when circumstances said otherwise. Together, they formed a fragile balance between exhaustion and belief. The boarding house came from a name neither sister remembered clearly. A distant relative, a great uncle who had once run a boarding house decades earlier, had passed away long ago. The property had been forgotten, abandoned, left to rot in a dying town. When the state finally tracked down the last living relatives, it was not an act of generosity, but bureaucracy. The sisters were given a choice: accept the deed or let the building be seized and demolished. When they arrived, the boarding house looked like a ghost trapped in wood and brick. Windows were boarded up, paint peeled away in long scars, and the front door groaned as if protesting being opened again. Inside, dust hung thick in the air, and the silence was so deep it felt like something sacred had been sleeping there. Emily felt fear immediately. Sarah felt curiosity. The first nights were terrifying. No electricity, no heat. Strange sounds echoed through the halls. Emily barely slept, convinced they had made a mistake. Sarah walked the halls slowly during the day, touching the walls, imagining laughter that once lived there. The boarding house had been a place for travelers, struggling families, and people between lives. Its emptiness felt less like abandonment and more like waiting. What they found inside was not money or treasure, but something more powerful. Old ledgers recorded decades of kindness. Notes tucked into drawers spoke of meals given freely, rooms offered to those who could not pay, and prayers written for strangers passing through. The boarding house had been built on quiet compassion. Emily read those pages late into the night and felt something inside her begin to loosen. The challenges were relentless. The roof leaked badly, mold-covered walls. Floors sagged dangerously. Emily injured her hand trying to repair a staircase. Sarah felt ill from the cold and damp air. Money was almost non-existent, but for the first time, every struggle belonged to something that was theirs. The sisters were no longer surviving temporary spaces. They were rebuilding a permanent one. Neighbors noticed the lights first, then the movement, then the change. A retired contractor offered advice. A local church donated supplies. Volunteers appeared slowly, drawn not by pity, but by purpose. The boarding house became a project the town had forgotten it needed. Emily learned leadership without realizing it. Sarah learned strength she never knew she had. As months passed, rooms were cleaned one by one. The smell of dust faded into fresh air. The building began to breathe again. Emily took a risk and applied for a small community grant. Against all odds, it was approved. Repairs accelerated. Heat returned. Water flowed. The sisters cried together the first night they slept in warmth. The boarding house reopened quietly, not as a business first, but as a refuge. Travelers paid what they could. Families stayed temporarily while rebuilding their lives. People shared meals in the common kitchen. The sisters remembered every cold night they had endured and made sure no one inside those walls ever felt invisible. Emily changed deeply. The bitterness she carried softened into gratitude. She realized that leadership did not mean control, but service. Sarah's health improved, her faith deepened, and her belief in people was rewarded daily. They were no longer homeless sisters. They were caretakers of a legacy built on mercy. Years later, the boarding house stood proudly restored. It became a landmark of quiet hope. The sisters never advertised their story loudly, but it traveled anyway. People came not just to stay, but to remember that kindness leaves footprints long after we are gone. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video so more people can believe that forgotten places still hold miracles. Before the story ends, we have one special request. Comment the word faith below if you believe that second chances can be hidden inside the most abandoned spaces. The sisters still walk those halls today, not as victims of loss, but as living proof that what the world leaves behind can become exactly what saves us.